Hello, everybody. Welcome to today's webinar. This is actually part of the BigQuery Survival Guide mini-series. What you're watching today is part two. I'm going to provide a little bit of a summary on what happened in part one, but for those who are interested and maybe you're coming here for the first time for this discussion, I highly urge you to also make sure that you check out part one. But for those who are now joining us, this webinar is going to be recorded. You will have access to the slides. All of this will be sent to you via email. If you have any questions throughout the session, please send it out. Leverage the Q&A option, not the chat option, and we'll make sure to address any questions that you have. But I'm very excited for today. We're taking one step deeper into the discussion around BigQuery backup and recovery. And of course, my name is Andy Fernandez. I'm the Senior Director of Product Marketing here at HYCU. HYCU, we were a Google Cloud Partner of the Year last year. We are the fastest data protection company in the world, and we focus on protecting your entire data estate, from your hybrid cloud environments to cloud native applications, SaaS. But most importantly for today's topic, we really have an emphasis also on protecting ML and AI workloads and data warehouses as well. I have the privilege here of also being joined by Sathya Sankaran, who is our head of cloud products here at HYCU as well. Now, for those who just joined, I saw a couple of people joined. This is the outline and agenda of the entire series. So 3 episodes this week, 10 to 15 minutes each, breaking down exactly everything from as a data engineer or as an IT manager who's been asked to support the Google team, I need to understand what is the clear breakdown of my data responsibility. I need to understand what are the actual scenarios that I should be looking out for. What is the cost of recovering from those scenarios? And what kind of native tooling is available to me within Google? And of course, do I need to think about a third-party backup solution like HYCU? So what we're going to focus on today now is we've already discussed the identification of the shared responsibility model within Google. We've gone through data loss scenarios, and we'll refresh a little bit on that shortly. But what we're really going to focus on today is understanding what the native recovery tooling like time travel is for, how it benefits you, and then what are some of the areas where you may want to complement the native recovery tooling as well. But before we dive into that, I'm going to ask Satya here to kind of go through a very quick summary for everyone attending around what are the threats to BigQuery data sets that we most commonly see, and what does that look like? Potentially, you might think, well, this is, an aggregation of data. Why am I worried about a deletion? But Satya, in a minute or two, walk us through what those threats look like.
Yeah, I think we covered a little bit of this in the first webinar as well, right? I think the events can be something that's completely outside your control, like outages and cyber threats, and something that's very much in your control, but just either an event-driven problem or an organic problem, right? Let me explain an event problem, right? So you're trying to stream some data. Things can go corrupt. You're trying to transform data. Things can go wrong. And you're also promoting data sets from test and dev to staging to production, and a lot of these things can lead to errors. But there are also a series of events that are more organic, right? So you could set up a partition expiration or a record expiration that you just have in your configuration. It's a call that you make a priori, not it's a decision you make, potentially a year, 2 years ago on what the record expiration and partition expiration should be. But for data sets that you're currently relying on, that may not be the right call. And when you suddenly want to look at a data set and you find that that data has expired because that's what the policy was set to, that leads to requirements for recovery. And of course, cyber threat, security is every single person's responsibility these days. If someone does get access to your project, someone does get access to your account, what could potentially happen to your data sets? And could there be a silent attack, right? Could they be deleting data sets that haven't been accessed in recent times, but you need them for once a month trending or a once a quarter reporting type workloads? And so all of these are real threats for your BigQuery data sets.
No, thank you, Satya. And this is going to be of particular importance later in the presentation because we're actually going to break down where does native recovery tooling help within BigQuery for these scenarios and what kind of scenarios you might want to think about a third-party backup for. But the first thing, Satya, let's go right into understanding some of the capabilities that Google already offers and does an incredible job of delivering self-service recovery as well. Let's talk through first, Satya, what is actually BigQuery time travel? What does that consist of? And then when you think about when to use it, what is it not used for? Let's walk through that and what that means.
Yeah, look, time travel is not a whole lot different from time machine that a lot of you are used to in your MacBooks, right? So it's really is a versioning and continuous versioning capability that is built into BigQuery. Every single record you can kind of trace back to a point in time. But with all these versioning systems, the more versions you can keep, the shorter the period you can keep them for, right? And that is really the scenario here. Time travel is brilliant in a sense that it could take you back to any point in time in the last few days. But the key risk here is the last few days. Time travel can be set up for anywhere between 2 days to 7 days, and which means that you can only go back to a 7 day window. A lot of people will say, "Hey, 7 days is plenty," and is that enough? But really, just look at your corporate policy on all of your workloads, right? What is your average retention across these workloads? And we work with 4,000 plus organizations we talk to, and we would say the average is north of 30 days. Right? A lot of people have 30 days, but a lot of people have a lot longer retention than that. So 7 days is a very short period to rely on for recovery. We are one vacation away from completely losing track of your problems and not being able to recover. And that's the situation you don't want to be in. But it is brilliant for immediate short-term needs. This is the only recovery option you need if you find a problem within 7 days.
No, that's perfect. So Satya, just to clarify as well, obviously from a from a recovery perspective, short term, somebody's made a mistake. Time travel does an incredible job. For those trying to also check the compliance box with time travel, is that possible? What does that look like?
Yeah, look, a lot of compliance is about two things, right? And one is your retention and isolation, right? Where are you actually keeping them, and how long are you keeping them? And the second is tamper proofing, right? And today, that is very much part of a lot of regulations. You could see things like NYDFS, which is a financial regulation, move from should language to shall language in their regulations, which tells you if it should is advice, if it is shall, you better do it, right? And that's what your board members are signing off on as doing today. A couple of years ago, I would have said that this 7 day retention is unacceptable because there was no other alternative. But now that we have very strong export capabilities and solutions out there that do BigQuery backups, I think ticking a box saying, "Hey, I have 7 days of retention," doesn't really help you with compliance. And also, if time travel sits in the same place your primary data is, are you really tamper-proof? If somebody gets access to your primary project accounts, are you tamper-proof is a big question to try to answer. And I don't think this can be part of your compliance story, but this alone doesn't complete your compliance story.
No, that makes total sense, Satya. Is it fair to say then that, when you think about how to use time travel in summary, excellent for operational recovery that has just happened and you want to get back to a good state, right?
Yeah, yeah,
Okay.
precisely.
Now, that's the operational side, right? That's the what I call Murphy's Law, screw ups. People make a mistake. It happens. We all do, right? As long as there's humans touching software, something bad is going to happen. Time travel does an excellent job of that. But Satya, let's talk about the more malicious side of the house, right? Let's talk about what happens within insider threats or any other else. There's another native tooling option as well called BigQuery Failsafe. Walk us through what that actually looks like. What does that mean and how to leverage it?
Yeah, look, BigQuery failsafe is for data sets that you completely delete, right? So your data sets get nuked. You don't have access to that data set anymore. It does go into this failsafe storage where data is still kept for another 7 days. If you need to recover, you can open up a support ticket with Google. You can go through that process and try to recover that data set. It doesn't recover it's with the time travel or any of that, right? It just get at the time of deletion, what your data set looked like, it would come back up. And it is an effective option if you are, and failsafe is not optional, right? I think Google actually enables this for every time travel, every BigQuery customer. And but the thing is, you have very limited capabilities when it comes to recovery. This cannot be your backup and recovery strategy. That, hey, 7 days I have the time travel, and 7 days I could potentially call into support. Yeah, with time travel, you are one vacation of yourself away from a disaster. And with time travel, you're potentially one vacation from a support engineer in Google from becoming completely unrecoverable, right? So these two things just have to, again, it can become part of your compliance story, but it can't be your compliance story.
No, that makes total sense. And just for context as well, especially for multinationals or if your organization's based in the EU, think about the Digital Operational Resilience Act, or easier said, DORA. When you think about DORA and the requirements, anything that touches production or hosts critical financial services data, PCI, within an organization or even a supplier of a financial organization, it requires explicit offsite copies. It requires explicit testing of this. Services that are native to the service that you're trying to protect are extremely helpful. But when you think about DORA, NIS2, and some other compliance requirements, you might want to look further as well. Now, Sathya, let's talk a little bit more about an advanced use case, right? We've talked through kind of the operational requirement, the break glass approach with failsafe. But let's talk through table snapshots.
Yeah. Table snapshots is, again, these are all tools available to customers, and they all exist for good reasons, right? So we got to just keep that in mind. But you need to have a more holistic solution. Table snapshots is exactly what it says it is. You can take a snapshot of your table for a longer retention period, but it sits literally right alongside your primary data. So all of the scenarios we talked about where someone gets access to your project, they did get I'm sorry, they do get access to your snapshots as well. So it simply doesn't have enough of a failure domain. And Andy talked about DORA and having to have isolation. And the same thing applies for a lot of the NSF regulations that are being put out by CISA as well. You do need to provide isolation. And table snapshots is, again, brilliant for having a copy immediately available, quick to take. It is available, but you don't actually create a new failure domain with taking snapshots. The second problem is you don't get the predictability with snapshots, because anytime you do reclustering within your primary data set, remember, snapshots keep blocks that have changed. So when you change a lot of blocks, either because of reclustering or vacuuming and all of these things, it does balloon up the table snapshots, and that does change the amount of utilization that you have on these snapshots. So just keep that in mind when you create your strategy.
Perfect. Satya, can we double click on this though? When we talk about time travel data not being captured, let's double click on that. What does that actually mean? And what does that mean from a recovery perspective?
Yeah, just because you took a table snapshot 7 days ago, does it mean that you have another 7 days of history behind you through the time travel, right? So time travel data gives you a maximum of 7 days, which we talked about earlier in the slide. But just because you take a snapshot doesn't mean you have that versioning capability also snapshotted. The snapshot only covers the base table that you are snapping. It doesn't cover all the other things, views, models, routines, your queries, and your versioning. All of that information is not captured, and just something to keep in mind when you create these solutions. But look, you're going to go do something with the data set that you know is risky. By all means, go take a table snapshot, do what you need to do, and ensure that you've achieved your desired outcome before you go ahead and delete these table snapshots. It does have a very legit scenario and use case to use, but it's not backup.
No, fair enough. So Satya, all right, so we've got failsafe, we have time travel, we have snapshots. There's one more, and I think this is the one that everyone actually thinks about. Their gut reaction is to just do this next thing as well. So let's talk a little bit about exports, what that means, and kind of where it works, where it doesn't.
Yeah, and so this all leads up to, what is acceptable for your backup strategy, right? And exports is a very acceptable form of backup strategy. Um, and I'll give you why. Because you have the ability to take a copy of your data set, push it to an alternate storage media or a location, and you have an independent copy that you can use to bring back at any point in time. It doesn't mean it doesn't have its limitations, right? So, but it is an effective form of backup, and it at least meets the technical definition of a backup. Is it still going to let you be compliant? Not always. First, you're not capturing everything, and I think you're going to kind of hear a few of these words again and again. Is it complete? Is it compliant? Is it consistent? I mean, these are all questions that you need to consistently be thinking about. Is this complete? Does it back up your views and routines and queries and models? All of these things, your table schema, does all of this get captured with your exports? The answer is a lot of these things do not get captured, right? And two, time travel in exports also do not get captured. Three, you can't write to an object lock bucket every time you export. After the export, you got to go remember to turn on object lock. And then the next export, you need to remember to configure to go to a different bucket, because once you've turned on object lock, you've got these restrictions. So an export can't run into an object lock bucket, and that means making it tamper proof is very, very difficult, right? So yes, export is a backup, but if you need to be compliant, it is one, not going to let you achieve that compliance easily. Two, it's if you're exporting across multiple data sets, it's not going to be consistent, because it's each individual export is a separate export, and it's from a separate point in time. And three, it's not complete. It doesn't back up all of the things that you need to bring up your data set. So those are the three pieces, we try to add in our solution when we do our backups.
Oh, that makes total sense, Satya. And let's actually revisit at the beginning of today's discussion. We went through those actual scenarios. Now that we have an understanding of the native tooling, and something I do want to mention as well, though, is, Satya and I at HYCU, we have so much experience protecting so many different cloud services. And we have to give kudos to Google and their ability to offer so many options for customers to actually perform a recovery. They're actually going way above and beyond what most ISVs and vendors do in the sense of providing customer self-service recovery options as well. So kudos to Google Cloud on that side. But let's now walk through, Satya, every single scenario that we discussed, right? All the possible ways to lose data. When does it make sense to understand that I'm covered, we're okay with the tooling that we have and the native options, or when do I really need to think about a third-party backup?
Yeah, and as we walk through, anything that you can detect quickly, anything that you see a problem right away, it's hair on fire moments. You have native tooling that are fast, that are very useful, and we certainly recommend that you use them, right? But anything that's a silent killer, your bed bugs in your environment, right, that you don't notice immediately, but it does creep up on you over time. Those are problems you need to have an effective insurance and strategy for, and where backups come. And the other thing that I also want to highlight, and something that doesn't get captured here, is also think recovery, guys. When you are thinking about cross-project recovery, think about different scenarios in which you have to perform recoveries. And think about whether, again, those three things we talked about. Is it consistent? Do I have a consistent copy of all of my data sets? So if I need to bring up an entire data set and a state in a different project, do you have all of that captured? Is it complete? Did I capture everything in my environment, not just base table data? Like, what good is just base table data if your data engineering teams have to sit and reconfigure everything on top of it from views and this thing. And you can imagine if you don't use materialized views on some of these data sets, how much money you're going to end up spending on top of your data set recovery itself, right? Because materialized views allow you to save a lot of money, and views in general allow you to go into specific parts of table without actually having to go into the entire table set, right? So you do need to capture those things. And compliance, think simple things like row level security. You may have set it up. Um, when you restore that data, do you restore with those row level security policies so that only the people that were previously able to access it can access it? Are you providing that isolation? Are you providing that immutability? These are all questions to think through. So also think recoverability, not just these failure scenarios where backup is a better play, but also when you want to recover, what tool would you rather have access to? A tool that offers consistency, completeness, and compliance, or a tool that solves one problem at a time for many of these things?
Perfect. So Satya, one thing to mention as well, something that we don't overstate enough is for most of your production applications, you have a BCDR plan, you have runbooks, you have documentation. This is one area where you really want to have documentation, not only understanding what your core requirements are, especially healthcare, financial services, but also making sure that you understand and document which tooling is available for what, who has access, who knows how to do any of this as well. So you want to avoid single points of failure. But last week's session, or a few days ago, we actually went through this data protection checklist, which we're going to share with all of you as well. But Satya, without going through every single bullet, if you had to just provide advice to a data engineer or an architect on today's call, what are a couple of things that you are a must for anybody who's responsible for the BigQuery environment in their
Yeah, look, today it doesn't matter what you use for data protection, but of course I would love for you to use our solution, and we'll kind of demonstrate that in the next series as well. We'll go through a full demo to show how we achieve this, but goes back to three things. Think your compliance posture, and compliance is not just because you may or may not be you may or may not be subject to a regulation, but these regulations are to protect you from something that could happen. So even if you are not subject to a regulation, assume you are subject to one and make sure that your policies stand up to it, right? You don't have to sign off on it. Your board doesn't have to sign off on meeting these regulations, but you still have to sign off on, do I have a plan for what this regulation is supposed to protect me against, right? So think compliance posture. Think about tamper proofing. Think about isolation, and think about how long can I go back to, and what my rest of the corporate policy looks like. Is it 30 days across the board? Is it 90 days across the board? And whatever that policy is, are you consistent with that with BigQuery, right? The second thing we talked about is consistency. If you have views and work that kind of spans past multiple data sets, and again partitioning into data sets and tables are just very normal in BigQuery, as you know. Just don't assume you're getting a consistent set of copies across your data set just because you're performing maybe an export at the table level. And three, definitely think about, do I capture everything in my infrastructure, not just within BigQuery, but also everything that surrounds BigQuery as well? Think your connectors. A lot of SaaS applications feed into BigQuery. I think one of the most popular connectors is Salesforce. Are you protecting your Salesforce? Are you protecting your Git? Are you protecting those things? Are also a question, but it's just a good exercise to go through. Am I protecting the views, the functions, the routines within BigQuery, but also am I protecting all these sources that are feeding me important data into this data set? So think those three aspects when you select a solution.
Perfect. And I think that's what we want to emphasize here. Regardless of your choice, if you pursue a third-party backup, the most important thing is that you're actually protecting and recovering this data. We're not seeing a very high percentage of organizations really documenting, testing, and ensuring that their BigQuery data sets are fully and consistently protected. But Satya, one thing to mention here. Let's talk through about specific use cases, not part of the checklist, but just when are a specific reason to think, well, my organization, we definitely are going to need a third-party backup and recovery solution for this. Let's talk about the first one.
Yeah, protection is just making sure you've got the entire BigQuery dataset, and if you again get your complete project nuked for whatever reason, we have heard of multi-billion-dollar companies, and there was one very popular instance not too long ago, a financial organization, and they just got their account completely wiped, right? And because of a configuration change. And again, this is not to point fingers at any one service or anything, but these things does happen. We've all done configuration changes that have caused problems. And that if you haven't, that means you haven't done enough configuration at this point, right? So these things does happen. You just need to have insurance. And again, this is making sure you're protecting everything. Second, we talked about consistency at least 4 times so far. But again, don't assume just because you are exporting each individual table that they're all kind of in a point where they're aligned with each other. And the best way to deliver it is actually leverage time travel. In fact, we do that in our solution. Is time travel gives you that capability to go back to any point in time instantaneously and create a version out of it. So what we do is really you leverage time travel, go back to a point in time and align all of your data sets to a single version and then do backup from there. So even if you backed up these individual tables at 10:05 and 10:10 or 11:30, you can still make all those backups look like they were taken at 10 a.m. in the morning. And that's a consistent point in time you can deliver across data sets. And three, we talked about tamper proofing. Um, it is a key reason why you must back up because you have a 7-day operational recovery capability with time travel. Um, you are really thinking about your big problems, like somebody comes in and deletes the whole thing, right? Or silently deletes things you don't get to notice. So immutability is a big part in this. As a solution, we are a big proponent of letting customers keep their own data because the minute you take data sets away, you have a lot of sensitive data. You don't want to have a different vendor keeping that data. And this is a lot of data, guys, to be pushing it to a different vendor too. So there is a lot of good reasons to keep it under your own control and your own tenant. But it does mean you're increasing your failure domain where if someone gets access into it, they can get to everything. This is where object lock, true object lock comes into play, where even if you change your mind down the road, you cannot do anything about it. So set object lock and immutability and protect from any spoofed version of yourself in future, right? And the last thing is really think the ecosystem. Don't think BigQuery as a workload. BigQuery, I see it very often as a mothership. It's a unified multimodal platform where a lot of unstructured data comes in, a lot of structured data comes in, a lot of transform data comes in, a lot of streaming data come in. Think who is your data sources and make sure you have a protection strategy for those sources as well. And always protect both at the source and also after transformation because redoing those transformation is very expensive as we walked through in the last call.
Thank you, Satya. And I think when you summarize this already, we're consistent in our approach here. If you're looking for a solution that goes beyond the native tooling that is focused on compliance, consistency, and completeness, you have to think about a third-party backup solution as well. Now, with that being said, tomorrow is the last day of this series. And what we're going to focus on now is exactly what HYCU can do to show you a consistent, complete, and compliant backup and recovery solution. Now, for those who are watching live, if there's any specific restore scenario any use case that you can think of that you'd like to see in the live demo tomorrow, add it to the Q&A or the chat or send us an email after the session. We'll make sure to actually tailor and customize the demo, especially to what the audience wants to see. You're going to see recovery scenarios. You're going to see how data is stored. You're going to see everything, but I'd love to know if there's anybody who wants anything very specific. We'll make sure to actually have that live for you tomorrow. For now, if you're interested in learning a little bit more about HYCU, you can scan this QR code. This data sheet tells you a little bit about what HYCU can do, but what I'm most excited about is for you all to see how Sathya is going to demo this solution tomorrow. 20 more minutes of your time. I've really enjoyed this session. I think we're going to do more of these, but for those who are joining for the second one, you have access to the first recording as well. For those who've been going to both, we'll see you tomorrow for the last part of this series. Thank you, Sathya. Thank you, everybody in the audience, for your time and attention. We really appreciate it, and we hope you have a great day.
Thank you all.